In 2025, Julian McMahon appeared in Netflix's White House mystery, The Residence, as Stephen Roose, the fictional Prime Minister of Australia. It was clever casting, but there was a detail behind it that sounded almost too perfect to be true. McMahon was not merely Australian. He was the son of William McMahon, the man who had actually served as Australia's Prime Minister when Julian was a toddler. For another actor, that coincidence might have been a novelty. For McMahon, it felt like the last turn in a career built around status, charm, and the danger hidden behind a polished face. He had played a demon who could make love look sincere, a plastic surgeon who sold perfection while falling apart inside, a comic book dictator sealed behind metal, a federal agent whose calm carried more weight than spectacle. And near the end, back in an Australian landscape, he played a smiling local ruler who controlled a beach like a private kingdom. Julian McMahon spent more than 3 decades playing men who entered a room already possessing power. The interesting question was always what they planned to do with it. He was born in Sydney on July 27, 1968, into a family that already belonged to public life. His father had been in federal parliament since 1950, had served in a succession of senior ministries, and became Australia's 20th Prime Minister in March 1971. Julian was 2 years old. That fact is tempting material for an easy psychological story. The politician's son who rejected one kind of power and chased another. But McMahon never gave us enough evidence to tell that story honestly. What can be said is simpler. Visibility arrived before he chose it. His surname already meant something. Yet the professional identity he later built would depend less on the family name than on the expressive possibilities of his own face. He began as a model. A Levi's commercial helped lead to a role on the Australian soap Home and Away, where he played Ben Lucini. The route looked familiar. Striking young model becomes television heartthrob. But McMahon later described his soap years in Australia and the United States as genuinely formative. The value was not glamour. It was repetition, speed, and responsibility. Daytime production taught him to arrive on time, work hard, and remain open to ideas from everyone around him. Years later, he remembered taking performance inspiration on Nip Tuck from members of the props department. That detail says more about his longevity than any story about being discovered. The face may have opened the door, but the working method kept him inside. After Australia came the American soap Another World. McMahon later laughed about being a 22-year-old newcomer whose first scene required him to climb out of a swimming pool in a Speedo. It could have reduced him to decoration. Instead, it became another apprenticeship. Learn quickly, commit completely, and do not behave as though one scene is beneath you. By the middle of the 1990s, he was moving through theater and American primetime television. Profiler gave him a regular role as Detective John Grant. Here was an early version of the McMahon effect. He looked like the romantic lead, but he carried enough edge to belong in a series about violent minds. American television was beginning to understand that his appeal worked best when it was not entirely safe. Charmed made that discovery impossible to ignore. Cole Turner entered the series as an attractive district attorney. He was also Belthazor, a demon sent to destroy the Hallowell sisters. The role depended on a contradiction that McMahon could communicate before the script explained it. Cole had to make danger desirable, then make desire seem capable of changing danger. His relationship with Phoebe turned a supernatural villain into a tragic romantic figure, and the character kept crossing the border between man and monster. The performance created a fan loyalty that lasted for decades. McMahon himself later separated the groups who recognized him: the viewers devoted to Nip/Tuck, the people who knew FBI Most Wanted, the movie audience that shouted Dr. Doom, and the Charmed fans who simply never let go. Cole Turner established the pattern. Julian McMahon could play a villain without asking the audience to stop wanting him on screen. But Nip Tuck transformed that gift into something more complicated. Christian Troy was a Miami plastic surgeon who appeared to possess everything the culture around him desired: money, confidence, sexual power, and an expertly maintained body. In a lesser performance, he would have been a glossy monster. McMahon made him restless, funny, cruel, wounded, and occasionally capable of tenderness. Christian understood that beauty could be manufactured, because he was constantly manufacturing himself. This time, McMahon's appearance was not simply useful casting. It was part of the subject. Nip/Tuck asked what happens when the body becomes a product and the self becomes an advertisement. Christian could identify another person's insecurity instantly, partly because his own confidence was never as complete as it looked. The series was provocative enough to attract attention with surgery, sex, and scandal. But it endured because the friendship between Christian and Sean McNamara gave the spectacle an emotional spine. Christian's appetites could damage everyone around him, yet McMahon kept revealing the loneliness beneath the performance of invulnerability. In 2005, Nip Tuck won the Golden Globe for Best Television Drama, and McMahon was nominated for Best Actor in a Television Drama. The nomination mattered because it confirmed that the industry saw more than a television heartthrob. The qualities that might once have limited him, beauty, ease, and almost excessive confidence, had become tools in a serious dramatic performance. Then, Hollywood made the metaphor literal. In Fantastic Four, McMahon became Victor Von Doom. The role expanded his fame from provocative cable television to a major comic book franchise. Victor was wealthy, brilliant, and entitled, even before catastrophe transformed him. Once again, McMahon played a man who believed power should naturally belong to him. But Dr. Doom also presented a strange problem for an actor whose greatest weapon was the movement between charm and threat. The character eventually disappeared behind a metallic face. The mask gave him iconic scale while taking away the subtle instrument that had made Cole and Christian so effective. McMahon returned for Fantastic Four: Rise of the Silver Surfer in 2007, and Dr. Doom remained one of the names strangers called out to him years later. His career after Nip Tuck did not follow one clean line. There were films, miniseries, genre experiments, and television roles. That variety matters because it challenges the idea that he spent his life repeating Christian Troy. He could still use seduction and menace, but he also learned to make authority quieter. On FBI Most Wanted, he played Jess LaCroix, leader of the Fugitive Task Force. Jess did not need Christian's vanity or Cole's supernatural conflict. The performance was built around control, listening, deciding, carrying responsibility for a team. Viewers who met McMahon through the procedural discovered a steadier presence. According to McMahon, people soon approached him to say they loved the show, while older fans continued to identify him with completely different decades of work. That coexistence may be the best measure of his career. He did not have one audience, he had several, each convinced that its version of Julian McMahon was the essential one. Then came The Extraordinary Circle. Netflix's The Residence placed mystery inside the White House during a state dinner. McMahon appeared as Stephen Roose, the Prime Minister of Australia. More than 50 years after William McMahon held the real office, his son performed a fictional version of it for an international audience. The role should not be mistaken for a portrait of his father, and there is no reason to treat it as a deliberate personal reckoning. Its power is in the image alone. Julian had started life adjacent to political authority. He ended up able to put authority on like a costume, voice, posture, timing, and make it serve a story. At roughly the same stage of his career, the surfer brought him back to an Australian setting opposite Nicolas Cage. McMahon played Scally, the leader of a local surf tribe who turns belonging into a weapon. Cannes selected the film for its 2024 midnight screenings. In his final published interview, McMahon spoke warmly about working in Australia and about recovering the full force of his native accent by spending time with the Australian cast. Scally was another antagonist, but not a repetition of Doctor Doom. He did not require a palace, a laboratory, or a metal mask. A beach was enough. His authority came from social control, masculine ritual, and the certainty with which he told another man that he did not belong. It was an eerily fitting final film role, an Australian actor returning to an Australian landscape, using the charm audiences knew and exposing the cruelty that charm could organize. But it was not a farewell designed in advance. The meaning arrived later. Julian McMahon died on July 2, 2025, at the age of 56. His wife, Kelly, said publicly that he had faced cancer and that he wanted to bring joy to as many lives as possible. The family asked for privacy. That is where responsible biography should stop. There is no need to turn private illness into a final plot twist. The public record already contains a complete and surprising arc. A child born beside political power became a model whose appearance drew attention. A commercial led to a soap. The soap taught discipline. American television discovered that his beauty became more interesting when it could not be trusted. Charmed turned that tension into tragic romance. Nip/Tuck turned it into a study of identity and earned him Golden Globe recognition. Fantastic Four placed it behind a mask. FBI Most Wanted replaced seduction with command. And near the end, The Residents and the Surfer brought him back to Australian authority in two radically different forms. McMahon once described success not as fame, but as staying committed to the craft, continuing to evolve it, and enjoying the work. That may be the clearest explanation for why so many audiences remember different versions of him. The face was the invitation, the craft was the career.